That's quite a question. What ought we to do? Different things are going on today in the scriptures, things that seem contradictory, but that's the irony of the cross. That's the greatest contradiction, because the cross is not the cross. It doesn't stop there. It leads to the resurrection. It leads to Jesus being with us. The contradictions today are a few. And it's ironic because the contradictions also are carried out in the liturgical colors. You see this beautiful pink vestment. Pink has been chosen to be the color of the third Sunday because of Paul's reading, where he opens up his letter to the Philippians and says, "Rejoice, I say to you all, rejoice in the Lord." That's reiterated in Zephaniah, the first reading. "Shout with joy, O daughter of Zion. Sing joyfully, O Israel." So they're happy proclamations. They're joyous proclamations. But while that's going on, there's an underlying sadness. See, this reading from Zephaniah, the Old Testament reading, was written after two major exiles that the Israelites had. They had been exiled in Babylonia. They had been exiled up north in Syria. They were exiled, but the author, Zephaniah, puts both of those in out of historical context, but uses them as a metaphor for people returning home to God. Basically, it says, remember how you guys were in exile? Remember how you suffered and all that? Both times, hundreds of years later from each other. My response is this: shout joyfully to the Lord. Be happy. You want to say, Zephaniah, do you know what you're saying? And the reason he's encouraging us to be happy, to rejoice in the Lord, even though we're struggling, even though we're coming back from exiles, because that applies to us every day, not just the Babylonian exile, not just the great exiles of the past, but every day there's an underlying sadness in our world, as we know. So on top of that, Zephaniah is saying, rejoice, and the key is, the Lord is with you. The Lord your God is in your midst, a mighty Savior. So we have feet in both worlds, the worlds of sadness and the world of rejoicing. We accept and understand the sadness, and Zephaniah reminds us, the Lord is with you, even through your sadness. So stand up, rejoice. Sometimes this might sound poetic, but in reality, we have to use it every day in our lives. Over this past weekend, we had the funeral of Jerry's mother, Mary Reynolds. We've been praying for her. She'd been sick for the last few weeks. So we were there while the body was being prepared in the funeral home and all that. We were there with his father. His father is 97 years old. His wife, Mary, was 86. And we're chatting with him, and he's concerned. It's an old man, sad about the loss of his wife, even while the Christmas tree is right there, even while there's Santa on the front door. He's sad about the loss of his wife. And he said a few things that are locked in my head. I prayed that this day would never come, the day we would bury his wife. And the irony of it, that he prayed that would never come, and we in the season of Advent in which we are praying for Christ to come back. The irony of our faith. And Jerry and I were sitting with him and encouraging him and saying a few not so potent words. It was his wife of 67 years that he was mourning. So there was nothing that you could really say. But think of it from the perspective of history, Zephaniah, and our faith, and the cross. Although we're trying to encourage him, I mean, one of his questions is something that you don't want to hear this question. Will I be buried with her? The cemetery was already ready. The stone had both their names on it. And his concern was to spend eternity with her in the same grave. Simple question that was already solved when they purchased the plot. So Jerry was telling him, yeah, Dad, Mom arranged it. She put both names on the plot, and it'll you'll be right there forever. You'll be buried together, and things like that. He was saying to his father to encourage him and to build up his hope. And you know what the father said? He said it in the Irish brogue, cute little Irish brogue. I'm not going to say it in the Irish brogue. He says, I know you're both trying to comfort me, but it's not working. The irony of the cross. I mean, think of Mary at the foot of the cross, blood dripping down from her son's body. Maybe she realizes he's the Messiah. Maybe she realizes on some level that he will come back in the resurrection, but we don't know that. So there is hope, though, that she has, because she got the message from the angel that you would be the mother of the Most High. So that irony, as she watches her son die, this is what I am rejoicing for. This is the fulfillment. This is the Messiah that the people of Israel have waited for centuries. So the joy of the hope that she knows from the message of the angel alongside the sadness of the cross. See, that's why we wear pink on this Sunday going toward Christmas, because the readings are very heavy. They're all readings that talk about the exile and talk about God rescuing us from the exile. And we wear pink to remind us, hope, rejoice. Zephaniah, God is in your midst. Now let's take it to our own homes. Even through the suffering in any family, through the losses, God is in our midst. And I could hear Mr. Reynolds saying, you're trying to comfort me, but it's not working. And you know what that means. You know what sadness is. We all do. And when someone's trying to comfort us through our sadness, we sort of tongue-in-cheek look at them and say, thank you. And how many people had wonderful things to say about his mom. But it wasn't enough, especially for Mr. Reynolds, especially for the kids. And that's the mystery of the faith that we have in Jesus Christ. That's why God sends his son as an infant, as a human being, and doesn't give him a plush bed, doesn't give him feather mattress. He gives them what the poor of Bethlehem had to offer. Stable crib of straw, surrounded by animals that, you know what animals do in a stable, wasn't too pleasant. But this is God's Son. The irony of our celebration of Christmas, God's Son being born in a mess, and God's Son growing always to offer us hope always to offer us joy because he's in our presence. God is here right now. And we in our own little worlds, every one of us, we know our sadnesses. We know some of you may not have enough money to buy the gifts you want to buy to celebrate Christmas. Some of you will be at the table and there'll be an empty seat. Some of you will be very socially conscious and do something for the poor during this Christmas season because it's a season of joy. But hunger goes on. Joy or no joy, poverty goes on. Prejudice goes on. That's why Christ, resurrected from the dead, is our guide, our light, our way to move toward the timely Christmas, 2024 Christmas, but in preparation for the great Christmas, the return of the Messiah. Every year we do it again. We wait the 4 weeks, reminiscent of the people of Israel waiting through the period of exile. We do it every year until we rejoice with them as they enter Jerusalem free. And we hear Zephaniah and the other prophets as well. The peace of God that surpasses all understanding guards our minds and hearts. The irony of the cross. While our hearts are focused on faith, our hope in Jesus, a part of us goes to the reality of sadness, suffering, carelessness, prejudice. So the world needs you to bring some of the faith that we celebrate during this period into the world. The secular world needs faith. And you and I know the secular world, they want to take over Christmas. No secret. No secret. The Rockefeller tree, the dances, the singing, rejoice, rejoice. They want to take over Christmas and make it a feast of noise and bling. But under that is the reality of the world. Not everybody is rejoicing. Not everybody is celebrating bling. Look at the Middle East. Look at Ukraine. Look at our own streets. So that underlying sadness goes on, and that's the cross, because at the end of the cross, the 3 days, comes back the Lord, resurrected to us. When the people went to John the Baptizer and they said, what are we to do? How can we prepare for the Messiah? Because his version of the Messiah was going to be a God of justice, destroy Rome, get rid of all the enemies of the people. I'm sorry, it wasn't God's vision of justice. That was John the Baptist's vision of justice. That's why John the Baptist sends his disciples to Jesus and say, what are you all about? And Jesus says, go back and tell John, my words, what I'm doing, what's being done. I'm not yielding a sword and chopping off the heads of Pilate and the other members of the Sanhedrin or the Romans occupying us. No, I'm loving. Jesus, I'm loving. I'm healing. I'm bringing sight. I'm feeding the poor. Wow, that's the way to get ready? We as Catholics call what John said justice. Don't practice falsehood. We call them, those actions, the corporal works of mercy. How to get ready for Christmas? And John tells us what the soldiers should do, what the politicians should do. But we as Catholics use the corporal works of mercy summarized to remember what John said and what Jesus preached. feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, clothe the naked, visit the imprisoned, visit the hospitalized, visit the ill, bury the dead. The cross reacts to the world by asking you and me to get into the guts of the world, to bring hope to the secular world through actions of love and actions of caring. Rejoice, yes, rejoice, but while we're rejoicing, hold on to the reality that the whole world does not rejoice with us. That would be our great prayer. But right now, we're challenged to replace hate and fear and prejudice, and the list goes on. It's negative. Replace all of that with joy, knowing that God is in our midst. When you go home, every one of us, apartment, house, complex, it doesn't matter. Know that Jesus is with you. Whether you have a branch or an entire tree or the beauty of our own sanctuary, God is in our midst. God is in our midst. If you take one bulb of all the bulbs on the various trees in our church today, one little flicker, identify with that. Because that's how it is. God is with each one of us individually and as a community of faith, calling us to bring, if I hear the message, the true message of Christmas, the true meaning of Christmas, once more I'm going to vomit, because the advertisers' true meaning of Christmas is buying bigger, better, and glitzier gifts. It's not the true meaning of Christmas. The true meaning of Christmas is bringing joy into the world, into the hearts of those in our families, into the hearts of those who are strangers. The true meaning of Christmas is waiting for the Messiah. And in Mr. Reynolds' name and his words, I know you're trying to encourage me, but it's not working. Today, the scriptures do work. Sometimes we have to break out of that mourning period or the suffering period of the world. Break out of it and realize the Lord is with us. He really is in our midst. He offers himself as hope and asks us to hope with one another. He gives us his Son in the Eucharist to remind us tangibly that he's in our midst. Rejoice. Again, I say, rejoice. Your Savior is near at hand.